So number one, big concept I want you to think about. You're going to live to 100. And you laugh because humanly this is a very difficult concept for you to think about. But here I am driving in New Jersey on the Jersey Turnpike, and Prudential Insurance has billboards that says a baby born today will live to 120. By 2020, the number of people who live to 100 will double, and it will continue to accelerate. It is a reality. In fact, in my current research study, which I asked women who live right now longer than men, what does it mean to you if I said to you, you're going to live to 100? And women would say, I need to afford to live to 100. And if I'm going to afford to live to 100, that means I have to work till maybe I'm 80. And if I'm going to work till maybe I'm 80, that means I have to stay healthy. That means I have to stay educated and technically proficient enough to be able to get a job. But then they thought about it and said, you know what, I started work at 20. I'm going to be working 60 years. I wasn't prepared for that. My parents told me I was probably going to work 25 to 30 years and get a gold watch and so on, and retire on a pension. That's not happening. Very difficult concept. Changes the landscape as an individual. But when you talk to corporations, they go, yeah, it's playing out in the corporation. There's 3 generations in the workforce. And if you're in retail, there's 4. I was just meeting with McDonald's. They start working at 14 generations in the workforce. So it's really here. Overriding theme in all of our think tanks, for sure. Let's talk about a little bit of the society trends that we talked about. Corporate leaders said, you know what? Our corporations are like a VUCA world. It's actually a military concept. Volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Every day, companies are dealing with the ambiguity of not knowing when is the next bomb going off, when is the next natural disaster, when is that next competitor going to come out of the blue, mook, and change your whole business model right before your eyes and you didn't expect it. So corporate leaders at our sessions are saying, I need employees who are leaders and employees who can respond and be agile in a very volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world. And this requires a different kind of person than we needed years ago. Globally connected world, another concept. And we had both firms at our think tank, eBay to Odesk. eBay, you today and I have opened up a storefront on eBay in less than 2 hours and have taken global currency. It is very easy today compared to the past to have a global business. The internet has really changed the landscape. That's very exciting as a corporate person because you can go global in seconds. But let's look at the flip side, Odesk. Odesk is one of these places where you can go out online and I have done this, to bid out videos, statistics projects, writing projects, a number of projects to the corporate world, to the outside world, and I get bids on it. And sometimes it's for $2 an hour from very smart people. So it has changed now the way that we get talent. It's not just your neighbor next door that you're competing with the entire world. Another big shift. Technology-oriented world. We are a computational world. I read a statistic that today your brain is trying to absorb the amount of data equivalent to 174 newspapers. That requires new skills, cognitive load management. How do I sort and understand what's important and what's not important, especially today, because you have so much stuff coming at you, you don't really know anymore. And the data is accelerating. So this impacts work. The concept of superstructing, the new office landscape. So what does work look like today? Well, you probably hear about Google and Facebook and Apple, places which are near me, that have mega campuses that are trying to take the talent and bring you in so you can collaborate, innovate, and converge, right? All your great thoughts together. But then you have people like Cisco, Pricewaterhouse consulting firms, IBM saying, go out, telecommute, connect with the customer, use the technology to come in. And then you have startups who say, I don't need brick and mortar, I can go down to Starbucks and start up there because I can because of so much technology. So even the way that work looks or how we produce has changed. The concept was called superstructing. Skills. We're not going to have time to go through all of the skills. And by the way, there was 9 forces that changed the nature of work, and I just went through about 4. There's 10 skills, and I'm going to talk to you about a couple of the skills. Number 1, sense-making. I call it uber critical thinking. How do you give sense or make sense of the big data that's facing you every day? So let me give you an example. Last July, I got a phone call from Nordstrom. Do people know Nordstrom, the store? Customer service called me up and said, Tracey, we miss you. I said, you miss me? I don't even know you. And they said, well, we actually know you. We know that you shop at Nordstrom every December and every August because that's our big sales time. We actually even know what week you come in, and we're pretty precise now on the day that you usually come in. We actually know what departments you shop, what brands you buy, and actually we think we even know your favorite salesperson. But you missed last December. We looked you up on Google and figured out that you were probably traveling because you're a business person, and that makes sense from your brands. So we sort of figured you out. So here's what we like to do. We're having our big sale in August. Next month, we're going to have a $50 gift certificate waiting for you at your favorite department. And by the way, your salesperson, Marcia, is going to be on vacation during that week you typically come in. But her manager, Rose, would be happy to spend time with you. When can we expect you at the door, right? Very interesting, a little eerie. So I called them back. I said, really, what are you doing here? And they said, we collect data. We've been collecting data like a lot of people do. Facebook does it, Target does it. Everywhere you go and do that barcode or do that credit card, they're collecting data, and now they're making sense of the data. And they said they could make sense of about 3 years of my past data, and they want to use it to create what they call customer intimacy. You know, they care about me. Nordstrom's all about customer service. They really care about me. Quite frankly, they want to increase sales, right? So that's right. This is happening everywhere. Sense-making, uber-critical thinking. Now that I have the data, right, technology part, I still need the subject matter expertise. How do I make sense of the data and actually use that in a way that a customer might buy more or feel better about my establishment? Okay, new media ecology. A lot of this is around the use of multimedia. You're using YouTube, right? You're watching visually. So today you actually need to develop media literacy skills. How do I communicate? How do I present? How do I attract customers using multimedia? I'm going to show you 3 examples in 3 different industries to illustrate the point. The first one is healthcare. The second one will be art history, which a professor sent me, and the third one will be news, and I'll explain it as we go. Many of the students used to tell me, Tracey, I love NCIS. I love CSI. I'm so inspired. I'm going to become a mortician like Ducky. And they would envision themselves in an autopsy room with dead bodies. And I said, have you seen the virtual autopsy? This is really the reality of where a mortician will go. So let's just take a look at this. They are collaborating, using actually virtual reality with the body. Now, you still need the subject matter expertise. You need to understand the anatomy of the body. But now you have this overlay skill if you need to be able to understand and comprehend it in a technology-based world. They're also collaborating on this autopsy with people in the room and people outside of the room. So you need to be able to connect virtually with others, use the software, and again, subject matter expertise. Virtual autopsy. Okay, The next one, an art history professor sent this to me. It's out on YouTube. And she said, I could not get my students to engage in my art history class. And she said, I saw this on YouTube, and I said, let me just bring it in and give it a shot. Well, she said her students got so engaged that they actually went out to the library to look up the artist because they were moving so fast. They actually wanted to find out more about it. They went out to the museum to track down, and they asked her, could you do more of this? Could you bring in more of these? I'm engaged now. I really enjoy this. You could turn up the volume a little bit because it's pretty music. This artist, by the way, has done many artists, this video artist, and put them out on YouTube. Think about the implications for museums, right? Being able to connect with customers, students, and each other using new types of literacy, multimedia. Okay, this is e-paper. Imagine, actually it's not, you don't have to imagine anymore, that video is so thin that your newspaper is one piece that is customized and dynamic at the same time. So she's on a train in Paris. She's a runner, by the way, so there's probably be some Nike ads customizing for her. She's shaking the paper but getting her Los Angeles news combined with the local Paris news so that it's very customized to her. Being able to walk into labs in Silicon Valley and see how thin paper and video is getting. I mean, just think about your tablets. They're getting thinner and thinner and thinner. So even the media itself has transformed. As you know, right, Newsweek doesn't even print anymore. Everything's online using multimedia, and the papers have changed as well. New media literacy, 3 examples: healthcare, teaching and museums, and the media industry. Okay, cross-cultural competency. This is another skill that was discussed. And was discussed in terms of how it used to be and what it's like today. So let me just talk about cross-cultural competency as it used to be. Well, when I worked at Apple Computer, I was commuting back and forth to Asia. I was in manufacturing, and my job was to go back and forth to various countries around Asia, look at the production lines, look at the inventory, look at the manufacturing, and make partners for Apple in the areas of displays and keyboards. All the training that we got was a little bit of language and a little bit of cross-cultural training. And all the meetings at that time had to be face-to-face because the technology really wasn't advanced enough to do anything else. So let me give you, this is a snippet, you have to listen to this, of what it was like back then trying to do face-to-face with a different culture, and in this case it's Japan. Can you turn this way up?
わかりますね。感情を込めてゆっくりとカメラを見て優しく、そしてあなたの古い友達に会うように言ってください。カサブランカのボギーのように君の瞳に乾杯。サントリータイム。
He wants you to turn, look in camera. Okay?
That's all he said?
Yes. Turn to camera.
All right, does he want me to turn from the right or turn from the left?
彼の方はもう準備ができてます。それでスタートがかかった時にカメラの方に振り向く時に左から振り向けばいいのか右から振り向けばいいのか、その辺のところはいかがなさいましょうかっていうことなんですけれども。
どっちだっていいんだよ。もういけないんだからそんなもの。時間がないんだよ、ボブさん。ね？だからもう早くあなたもうテンション上げてカメラ見てカメラ目線でゆっくりとね、パッションがカメラ目にはパッションだよ。わかった？
And with intensity. Okay?
Is that everything? I mean, it seemed like he said quite a bit more than that.
Okay, so you get the point. So that's, and you still feel that when you go to different countries. So let me just touch on the cultural kind of training that we used to get. So here I was at Apple Computer going back and forth to Japan. And we would have very large teams working on manufacturing lines. And you know, the Apple t-shirt was very popular then as it is now, except back then we're much older, it had many colors, right, than compared to now. So we said, why don't we bring over a whole bunch of t-shirts? You know, this could be a really interesting gift. And for everyone who works there are very large teams, but there's hundreds of them. So why don't we just ship them over and hand them out when we get there? And that's what we did. Ship them over, we get there, we go to the boardroom, there's our big brown boxes full of t-shirts. I was so excited that they were there. We called everybody in off the floor and started to hand them out and said, thank you so much for all your hard work. And people were very happy. In fact, we went down to the manufacturing line that afternoon and they were wearing the t-shirts. And we said, good going. We picked out a good thing to give them. Well, the next morning we went down and did our manufacturing line walks again, looked at the inventory, checked in on the staff, and they were wearing the t-shirts again. And we said, well, okay, we just gave it to you yesterday. Maybe that's not such a big deal. It's a little weird, but okay, they like the shirts. Well, the third day we go down and do the same thing, looking at the inventory lines and walking up and down to meet the staff, and they're wearing the t-shirts again. So I said, okay, something's really wrong because we only gave them one t-shirt per person, so are they washing them? How are they doing this? So we said, okay, everybody back up and bring them back into the conference room. We were so excited that you love these t-shirts. We're so happy that you are enjoying the gifts that we brought. And the head of the plant said to me, gifts? We thought these were uniforms. So what was the problem here? We did not understand the cross-cultural protocols of presenting a gift. It should have been wrapped. It should have had a gift-giving ceremony. There should have been a certain way that we identified that what we were bringing was a gift. And without that, they thought it was a uniform. So we learned a lot. Now, let's fast forward. Here I am at Cisco Systems, right, years later, using lots of technology. And Cisco says, yep, we do a lot of international business. That's what I was doing there, international manufacturing. But now we need to connect everyone using technology. You still need to understand those competencies, the language competencies, the cross-cultural competencies, but now we have this overlay. We're in a technology-based world, so you have to be able to do this using technology. How do we connect people using telepresence, using WebEx? Being able to organize and have teams, manufacturing teams, work together even though they're not in the same facility. Virtual collaboration. So Cisco had many offices, and we would connect them using telepresence and WebEx. Very easy, right? You're here and I'm there video conferencing. But then they said, well, what if we want to have somebody from India and Europe and the United States all on the stage together? Telepresence is a little more point-to-point. How do we do that? And they came up with holography telepresence. Now, I don't have a good example from Cisco, but I have an excellent example of this from CNN. How we're bringing in, using holography, people to be together in a technology stage. You turn this up.
High-definition cameras ringing me. In a ring around me, I'm in the center, and they shoot my body at different angles, and I'm told that transmits what looks like an entire body image back there to New York. These cameras, I'm told, talk to the cameras in New York, so they move, and they know when to move when the cameras in New York move, and it looks a little different from a real person there, but it's pretty remarkable.
It's still Jessica Yellen, and you look like Jessica Yellen. We know you are Jessica Yellen. Let's get back to the important politics of this night. What are they looking for?
Okay, so the example is that you still need to have those core skills. Nothing goes away with the core skills, but now you need to be able to translate these skills in a technology-based world. This is a picture I took. I was at Stanford. There's the Anybot. The Anybot is a robot with telepresence in the head, and the person who is in the Anybot is actually sitting, could be sitting in India, could be sitting in Chicago. It doesn't matter. You check into the Anybot. You move the Anybot, so Susan was in the Anybot sitting with me at the table. I could adjust her height, and we could walk around. Just think about, I could have done this in Asia years ago, going up and down the inventory lines and manufacturing lines. The Anybot has implications, you know, just think about it for medical, remote patients, being able to walk and participate in meetings, teachers, being able to teach a class from a remote location. When Susan checks out of the Anybot, Eric checked in. And Eric was in a different location because the meeting I happened to be in was more important for Eric. So you can have these robots combined with telepresence being able to transport you to any kind of meeting. Fascinating, and they're actually pretty reasonable. A lot of these robotics now are very reasonable. I'm going to do novel and adaptive thinking. Novel and adaptive thinking is being able to add in a layer of creative thinking or new thinking to existing technologies. So let me give you an example. Okay, can you move it ahead for me then? Thank you. So out in Silicon Valley, IBM has a big facility at Almaden. And they have, you probably heard of Watson. And Watson is a supercomputer that uses artificial intelligence and adaptive technologies to basically play Jeopardy. And if you come out to play Jeopardy with Watson, you're guaranteed to lose because Watson has all of the data, all of the questions, all of the answers, and can computationally move faster than a human mind, okay? So the IBM researchers said, well, that's really nice, right? So we have this big, powerful computing machine. What could we really do with it to do something meaningful? Now, novel and adaptive thinking. What if we take all of the information out there on cancer? What if we take the prescriptions, the symptoms, the medical journals, some of the more controversial treatments, some of the successful treatments, load it into Watson and see if Watson can come up with a cure for cancer faster than we can, right, as human beings. Novel and adaptive thinking. Okay, can we turn, thank you. 3D printing. Let me explain a little bit about 3D printing. It's a big deal in manufacturing, right? So when I was back in manufacturing, we used to make prototypes. Prototypes were created by hand, and you would make a prototype of anything before you would produce it to make sure you worked out all the kinks before you made thousands of them down a production line. So today we have something called 3D printing. So just imagine a printer where you pour in either metal or plastic or some sort of ink substitute. You program in your prototype model and push a button, and the printer makes the prototype for you. Really profound, mind-blowing, really, change in manufacturing. Well, let's think about that novel and adaptive thinking. What if we could take that concept and translate it into another field, such as healthcare? What if we could actually print and make ears? Let's take a look. You're going to have to move it forward for me. Thank you.
I'm Dr. Benasser.
And turn it up.
The invention that we've discovered is a way to print living cells in a material that can be used to reconstruct tissues in the body. My laboratory is interested in regenerating cartilage wherever it's found in the body. The process starts with a scan of an ear. We sit someone down in a chair, and we have a camera that spins around their head and takes a 3D image of their head. We then can very precisely map out the topology of the ear. The next kind of key step is developing the ink for this printer. This ink is actually a living ink. It contains living cells. It's alive when we put it into the printer. It's alive when it comes out of the printer. The real power of the printing technique is that it can be used to make geometries that you just can't make with any other technique. You can make parts with holes in them. We can layer and cover and put different cells next to each other to create really the complex organs that make up our bodies. And after 2 months in an incubator, the tissue fills in and looks white, just like real cartilage. The implants that we're making are not rubber or plastic. They are alive. They grow inside the body or out. And this has a whole host of advantages over conventional technology. The body accepts these materials like it's part of the body because it is. Our long-term goals are to change the way that clinicians practice, to give them the next generation of implants that will be more successful, more like real tissue that will last in the body for decades.
Pretty profound, right? Fascinating on what we can do is new technologies, subject matter expertise, and really change the landscape of the future. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about cars, because when I grew up, a car had 4 wheels and we changed the oil, and that was about it. Today, if you look at the cars, on the top left is a Nano, which is a very inexpensive car. You see a very expensive car like the Bugatti. You see an electric car. You see a hybrid car. And down on the right, you see the robotic car, which Google and Toyota have come out with. So cars have really changed quite a bit. Cars have become so complicated, actually General Motors has a call center for us. You don't know how to start your car, you can't turn it on, can't use your GPS. Our cars have basically become mobile devices and computers on wheels. It's a much more technological way of driving. In fact, you probably can't even change the oil on your car anymore because it's just too complicated. So our world, even down to the car, has gotten very technology advanced. But you know what? Also how you repair a car has changed too. So if your students are thinking about being an auto mechanic, tell them to think again. This is from BMW. This is how you repair cars that are very advanced and sophisticated. This gentleman is wearing the equivalent of like a Google goggles, right? And it's using augmented virtual reality to be able to see the inside interior of the car. The goggles are talking to him. It's training him, it's telling him how to repair that car, and showing him using augmented virtual reality the steps. He still needs the subject matter expertise of understanding a car, now a computerized car, but also how to repair a car using some of the newer technologies. So I tell my students, you think you can be an auto mechanic? Think again, because you're going to need to have both. Subject matter expertise in a technology-based world. And by the way, when I was up in San Francisco delivering a webinar on the future of work, I stepped into a taxi cab and the driver said to me, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "Well, I just gave a webinar on the future of work." And he said, "You know what, I'm not going to have a job in 2 years." And I said, "Why aren't you going to have a job? Taxi cab drivers have jobs for life." He said, "Google applied for permits in Las Vegas and San Francisco. They want their robotic cars to replace all of the taxi drivers." And I thought about it and I said, well, you know, it is safer, really. I am always driving with these taxi drivers who are either falling asleep on the road, eating, texting, or phoning. And then, you know, you have drunk drivers. And then, of course, you have people who are handicapped, opening up the opportunity for them to drive. You could actually see the possibilities of having autonomous cars for people and also as taxi drivers. And he felt very upset because he didn't have a fallback plan. He always thought he'd have a job as a driver somewhere. Now, in manufacturing, let me just go back. Okay, in manufacturing, many of us think of manufacturing as it was when I worked in it, right? And this is only flashing back less than 10 years. We think about people on the line and then getting outsourced to overseas. But it's really changed quite a bit, and manufacturing has had a huge impact with technology. But let me just show you what most people think of manufacturing. Do people know I Love Lucy? Okay, then everybody's going to know this scene.
All right, girls. Now this is
You can turn it up.
chance. If one piece of candy gets past you and into the packing room unwrapped, you're fired.
Yes, ma'am.
Let her roll!
So this is easier. Yeah, we can handle this, okay? Here she comes.
splendidly. Speed it up!
So in actuality, a lot of people still imagine that manufacturing's like that, maybe to a disservice, because they think that that's what the job is. This is Baxter. Baxter is about $35,000, made in the United States, becoming very popular, doing all the same things that Lucy and Ethel do on the chocolate line. And Baxter doesn't need to eat, he doesn't need to sleep. In fact, his face has lots of personality. You can see when he's happy, when he's sad. But this is really where manufacturing is going. You know, I travel a lot, so on the plane I always watch these documentaries, and the Mini, I was learning, is made in these mega factories, 90% of it by robotics. There's really only 10% of the human touch. So manufacturing has had the major impact with technology as well. Smart machines and automation is all about robotics. This is a robotic bellboy. It's actually in New York. When you walk in, the bellboy comes over, grabs your luggage, takes your room number and puts it in a locker for you, and then has it on hand when you need to pick it up on the way out. So no job will be untouched by some sort of technology. A gentleman who was a bellboy, who was concerned about his own job, recast his skills so that he could operate the firms that actually make the robotic bellboys, because he had the subject matter expertise and realized that it was moving into a technology-based world. And if you ever thought that the hairdresser or the barber was off limits, well, there's robotic barbers as well. So let me just touch on a little bit about the future of you and your students. I call it today your career adventure, because let's face it, you're living to 100, and you young ones up front, 120. So you really have a long work span and an adventure ahead of you. In fact, if you look over on the left, that's about how much time students leaving college spend career planning. That's an hour and a half a year. If you look over on the right, that's 2,700 plus hours. That's how much time they spend sleeping. So why do I make a point of comparing those two data points? Well, you spend about a third of your life working and a third of your life sleeping and about a third of your life doing everything else. So maybe career planning and career development should spend more time with it. In fact, when I looked at when I graduated college, there were about 20,000, 25,000 different jobs and occupations listed. Today, there's over 35,000 jobs and occupations listed by the BLS, and we know that number is going to increase dramatically. So how do you grapple with the number of jobs that are exponentially increasing, and how do we cope? And how do we plan our careers? My suggestion, which I give to students and adults, is to start thinking about your life instead of the terms of a career is about you. You are a product, you are a service. You need to think about how you're going to take, in my case, Tracey Wilen is going to get me to 100. How is she going to fund it? How am I going to keep this product vibrant? How am I going to have it generate income, keep it educated, skills, and technology proficient so that I can actually fund myself to 100? My suggestion is, instead of looking in terms of one long career, start looking at it by decades. What are you going to do in your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, your 50s, your 60s, your 70s, your 80s, your 90s, and your 100s? It sort of helps you see the longer goal and how you need to make shorter objectives. I'm going to stop here. I want to thank you very much for spending part of your morning with me. I hope that something was useful for you, your colleges, and your students. Thank you.
And we are doing so well on time that we have some time for questions. So if you have questions, you can come down to the mics, and we have time for quite a few questions. So please do. Or you can just holler out if you think you can do that. Comments, questions? Come on, you guys. We had people lined up. They take a little.
Yeah. Well, I would be very interested to hear what you're doing at your various institutions, particularly in the areas of career development and technology, and how you're coping with it. So it doesn't have to be questions only.
I'm so excited about the 4 or 5 of the 10 skills you covered. If you have any other time to go over like maybe 1 or 2 more.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me just click back. And I actually have a PDF which I sent in advance because I knew this question would come up on all 10 skills, which I have here are the 10 skills and examples. But the one, cognitive load management, is a skill to develop to be able to sort through a lot of, it's probably easier if I just click back. A lot of information. So how do you develop that skill? Well, I did an example 2 summers ago. I actually flooded myself with information, 174 worth newspapers a day. That's what I did. I had feeds coming in. I had newspapers at the door. I had 2 TVs going on, 2 radios going on, and I just said, how's my brain going to cope with all of this information? And the way what I found is your brain does cope. I started to read everything and exhaust myself, watch every TV show and exhaust myself, and then I started to sort, and I started to prioritize. So at that time, I happened to be working on my women's research. And then I started to only see the women's titles that I was looking for in the research studies. I also started to notice that the quality of papers varied quite a bit. So there was a certain paper that was better than other newspapers, and that paper would always bubble to the top. And then I also noticed that I would start to throw out sections or tune out radio shows that just didn't have the quality of information I want. So cognitive load management, it's the way of moving through a lot of data. Sorry, let's get back.
It's up there. I don't know why it's not in front of you, Tracey, but look at the screen.
Oh, thank you. Okay. Okay, social intelligence. Think about how you communicate today using social technologies. It's a whole overlay that has really moved into the workplace. Customers today actually respond more. Many firms, particularly if you're a consumer-based firm, need to learn a lot about social technologies. How do I use Facebook to create that same kind of intimacy that Nordstrom calculated my data? How do I use LinkedIn to be able to create relationships and networks with other people? How do I use Pinterest, and pin things to be able to increase sales or to create a marketing awareness? So a lot of firms said that social media has really changed this whole way of actually working, that you need to develop almost a social intelligence about it. They also talked about in terms of training, that the classroom face-to-face training wasn't doing it anymore because the younger generations were using these newer technologies, and social technologies was one of them. How do we use these technologies now to train people, to engage people? I'd like to actually, let me see, a transdisciplinarity. Okay, that's a big one. T people, really easy to remember. Breadth and depth. And I'm going to overlay it, since I talk so much about it, the T for technology. This is what companies were saying. We need leaders today who are not just specialists and not just generalists. We need people who have the breadth and depth to be able to operate and lead in these very volatile environments. So when I talk to recruiters and ask them, how do you get this T person? They said it's actually, in our lingo, it's called the A player. That basically firms are looking for people who have checked a lot of boxes with experience, have subject matter expertise, skills, and leadership capability. And these people are increasingly very hard to find. So I'll just flip forward to some of my newer research, because I ask HR, right, and I ask companies, how do you develop these T people, A players? And it's a struggle because everyone has been programmed, right? You start a job and you just move vertical up the ladder. But if you need a T person, you really need to start rewarding people for lateral moves, external opportunities, leaving firms, coming back to firms, being on teams, getting those skills, being able to understand finance, marketing, technology, and sales. How do we create these people? It's a big challenge. A lot of people, including myself, have done this on our own. In a competitive world, you start to see, being a manufacturing person is going to get me this far, but if I build in strategy, finance, sales, and marketing, I'm much more valuable. If I get an MBA and a doctorate, I'm much more valuable if I become technically proficient. And so some of us have been making these moves. And quite frankly, the younger generation is more inclined to make a lot of these moves than the older generation, right? Because we were taught. Boomer generation, Generation X, go to a company, stay there, wait your turn, right? And those days are over. So the T person was actually a very big concept. I want to go back to sense-making because I gave you a data example, but let me just give you a healthcare example because it might resonate with you. Years ago, my mother-in-law, who lives on the East Coast, so I didn't really see her, had a lot of symptoms. And she would go to the doctor and say, you know, I have headaches. And the doctor would run a test and say, okay, well, maybe you have migraine headaches, and here's the medicine for it. And the headaches didn't go away. And then she said, well, now, Tracy, I have a headache and my eyes are blurry. So then they write you go to the eye doctor. And the eye doctor would say, oh, you know, you're older, right, because she's in her 60s or 70s. You probably need a new prescription. And so that's what they did. And then she called me back. And she said, now I have a headache, and my vision isn't working, and now I have tingling. So I said, you know what, why don't you go to a neurologist, right? Something's up here. It's kind of odd. So she went to the neurologist, and the neurologist said, bring all your tests with you, and I'll do my own tests as well. And the neurologist sat down and looked at the vision test and looked at the headache test and did his own tests, and then said, I have a sense, because I've seen a lot of patients, that I actually think you might have a brain tumor. It's from the experience of seeing a lot of patients combined with the ability to read the tests. And then he gave her an MRI, and there was the big old brain tumor, which she's fine today, and they got it out. But sense-making can also mean taking the data, which is so important in technology, but also having that human experience. And I think you as professors and teachers understand that very well. You can look at the test and the answers, but then you've seen those students and you know their profiles very well. Design mindset. Steelcase, if you know, you probably have a lot of their equipment in your schools. They design desks, chairs, office equipment, school equipment. Steelcase really was very vocal about this whole way that you have to actually redesign your environments to increase productivity. So instead of, maybe this is not the best setup for an auditorium, right? Maybe if you were thinking about having a collaborative discussion, maybe we should have designed this with a center and some alternative stages for sessions. In a healthcare environment, is the doctor's office really, is that how you want to design it these days? Or maybe you want to have more integration with the patient in many steps. Same thing in an office. Should we design it so there's no desks, no walls, so people collaborate more? So the whole idea of designing an environment to increase the productivity of the activity that you'd like to have there. And it varies by industry and it varies by profession. I can't see that far. I think I got them all. Did I get them all? I think so. And I sent the PDF so you can go through them. And if you need the full report, it's actually at the Institute for the Future, because that's where we created and hosted the think tanks, and it's on their website as well and in depth. And then if we need to get your report, we'll get you that too.
I have a question. And it comes from the experience of working with a lot of online teachers and a lot of offline teachers too, people who are looking at what's going on today, particularly, you know, we're dealing with these massive classes, and also just generally online and using a lot of technology. And they're fearful of, and it's not you guys, I don't think, but it's the folks at home who haven't tried teaching online and aren't too sure about it. And they're, we're talking about flipped classrooms, and we're talking about, changing the teaching paradigm from how we were taught to, the kids that are coming up. And folks are afraid. There's a lot of fear. And you guys have probably all encountered that, where, you're talking to a colleague and they're saying, they're going to take my job. And we just completed designing and offering a MOOC. And the professor, who's going to be here today, he might already be here, I haven't seen him, but will be presenting later, said, I've been working in this thing for 5 weeks and I never one time felt my job was threatened. And so what would you say to teachers particularly who feel that the technology is really threatening their future as a teacher?
Yeah, good question. Thank you. So these presentations that I do, by the way, were inspired from my students. So I taught for over 16 years adult and evening bachelor and MBA classes. And it was always after work, and I was tired, my students were tired, and they would fall asleep, and I pretty much was pretty beat too. So here I was working at Cisco and Apple during the day, and I started to play around with the technology and just start to bring in these snippets. So I would start clipping and learning, because it meant a lot to me to be able to have a class stay awake. And I started to bring in a snippet here and there, and the students said, Tracey, less of you, more of the video, right? So I said, well, okay, I've engaged them very much like that art history professor. So I got hooked. At that point, I got hooked because I was all about my student learning. So if that's what my student needed to learn and stay engaged and stay awake, that meant a lot to me. So now we flash forward, right, and here I am at Stanford studying higher education, really, and online learning. And I did a mini study that unfortunately I didn't publish, but it's very intriguing. I started to watch younger students and older students and how they learned. And what made sense to them to absorb information. And I watched that depending on what your preferences were and the technology that you grew up with, or what you learned in grade school, heavily influenced how you absorbed information. So some people were using video, some people were using a book, some people were using a pad, some people were, texting, but it didn't really matter because people find their own custom learning paths. So I actually thought, really my role as a professor isn't to jam technology down their throats, it's to open them up to the opportunities and the tools that make sense for them. So I am always going to read a book. Yes, I also use the Kindle, but I tend to migrate because that's how I was trained. But I have students who will migrate to the videos, and I'll say, you know what? Here's 5 links that I really think are quality videos on YouTube to illustrate the point. Oh, and you like social media? Well, here are the main blogs that I'd recommend that you go out to. And if you want to do, your homework on your mobile device, here's the format, right? Because you need to just send it in a format. And if you prefer to present in PowerPoint, right? So a lot of these technologies. So that was, again, if it's all about the student, which I believe it is, technology is an enabler for you to create more connectivity with your student and their success. So I don't view it as a threat at all, but something that I need to do so I can get my student to the place where they need to be. And the place where I need my students to be was successful in their very long careers. And how am I going to make sure that they're highly marketable and employable once they get out of college? Long answer.
That's all right. Are there any other questions? Do any of you? Yes, come on forward. Please say who you are and where you're from.
Julia Cohen from Pierce College. I have a question that's like a challenge. I'm here because I love technology and I see the future, but my colleagues, I suspect, aren't all the ones who are at home. They're not all afraid of technology. We're all at the end of our semesters now. We're mentally exhausted. So our colleagues are presented with something probably a few weeks before finals. Why don't you learn this? For next semester, why don't you present this? They are exhausted. So perhaps this is my challenge. A way for us to approach our colleagues, in fact, ourselves as students, a way to introduce us to the technology in little bites, in easy approaches, not look at this video and learn it, because that doesn't work. Not attend this, well, not this seminar, but a 2-week seminar where you get piles of information and no time to apply it, because that doesn't work. A system of modules, maybe, where our colleagues can meet the technology we're talking about, or we can meet the new technology that we're discussing today and apply it. What do you think?
Yeah. So, okay, so I'd be very curious what other people in the room think and what strategies they're using, but one of the areas I was exploring years ago is could these libraries evolve into technology hubs, comfortable centers where students and faculty could come in and use and learn technologies, because quite frankly, I think a librarian is a gift. Because the librarians know everything and are very fast at, many are very fast at adopting and trying out new technologies. And I always envisioned that could be the center where people could go in and learn in a very safe environment technologies. But, that's funding and that's, can be difficult to do. My question is out to others. How are you dealing with that issue? Because, I'm in the corporate side, seeing it's force-fed. Technology is, particularly if you work in Silicon Valley in a high-tech firm, it's not an option. You must. At Apple, I had to learn all of Apple's technology. At Cisco, I learned all of Cisco's technology, and at HP, all of HP's technology. And I'm really glad they force-fed it into me, because I would be probably more hesitant now at this age to start to try it out. So what ideas or what are you doing in your colleges with your peers? Yes, sir.
There are a bunch of federally funded, I'm Steve Linthicum from Sierra College, and there are a number of federally funded opportunities for us as instructors that are not advertised very well. There's the MP ICT up in San Francisco. There's the CSSIA. It's in the Midwest. There's Baytech, which is out of the East Coast. And they have opportunities both online and on ground. For example, Baytech, at the end of July, the beginning of August, they're covering $1,500 in travel expenses for me to go back and take a SharePoint class. And last week or the week before, I took a class down here with MPIC. And they provided the travel expenses. So there are opportunities, it's just they're not well advertised. And you have to use Google and you have to go out and find them for us. And that to me is a challenge. Not because I can find it, but there are seats that go empty because faculty are not apprised of these sorts of benefits.
Right, no, that makes sense. Thank you for sharing that. Another thing is what I do is Microsoft stores near me, they opened up. It's $100 a year for 52 hours of one-on-one tutoring. So I do that. So you go once a week and you get a private session for an hour to anything on Microsoft. Apple, as you know, has classes. And so do the Sony stores and so do the phone places. And that's free, pretty much free. Go ahead.
Hi, Debbie Macon, Norco College. I just mostly have a comment and also a question. Our school does a lot, we're a smaller college, and we do try to do a lot of training in-house, but they can only send one person to something like this, whereas we probably needed to send probably about 7 or 8. Do you have any suggestions on how to help with costs also with some of this wonderful technology like the Anybot? I can't imagine affording anything like that. The costs of this technology for colleges to absorb. I mean, we experience this every time we want to get a new kind of program for distance ed. Like, oh, do we go to Moodle? Well, that might be more expensive. Well, let's try and get the Blackboard version, which might be less expensive. Any suggestions on how we handle the costs of this and public education, because my concern is we will see the private side doing well because they have a lot more money than the public side. Okay.
So my sense is that the answers are probably in the audience, but I'm curious, do you have exchanges or internships with companies that use technology so that the students can actually, for credit, be able to go in and learn and experience the technologies firsthand? Is that something that's popular or not popular? It's possible. Out there. Yeah.
Establishing advisory committees and then actually working with industry to provide those opportunities to students, they are there.
Yeah.
It takes time to develop and cultivate those relationships.
I understand.
Can I add something to that?
Yep.
I want to add something to that. We used to do, I think it's, you hit on a really good idea. We're sharing this mic and we're doing a little dance here. You hit on a really good idea. We used to send teachers in the summer to intern with paid internships, actually, with companies. And I don't, do we still do that, Barry? Do you know if we do any of that? Does anybody know if that's going on anywhere anymore? K-12 does that, but we're not doing that. Whoa, there we go. Yeah, the budget's always a problem, but you know, we have people in our forces, in our colleges who are really smart, I think, and they know a lot of things that could be useful. I mean, we're actually training people to move into some of these businesses that maybe we aren't completely aware of them changing. And I know that in our career tech advisory committees, we get that information, but it isn't as good probably as if we went out and actually experienced that, started doing that again, and particularly in the areas of high tech for stuff like we're doing with distance ed. That might be a way to go about it, and maybe to get that started again. I think what you were talking about was trying to get to those people who don't recognize the shift, who won't recognize the shift, and trying to encourage them to see that things have changed, and they have not. The people have not.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Sean Landers, I'm Cuesta College, and thank you. That was a nice segue back to what I was going to address. The open question about, I mean, what about the faculty that don't know about the technology or are reluctant to embrace the technology, and how do you, impart that? How do you get them drawn in? And that's my role is actually a trainer. I'm not a teacher, and so that is my dilemma. And part of the problem is economics. Community colleges, we don't have a lot of money. The other is the time. Most of the faculty, at least at our school, and I suspect most, are part-time, and they have their real job supporting their their community college job. And so trying to find time to meet them. When I first started off, I did a lot of face-to-face classes, and that has dwindled. And the fact is people just don't have the time, and people don't know what they don't know. And so one of the things that I'm exploring is what somebody kind of mentioned, the idea of taking things in modules. And so I'm doing a lot of online computer-based training, little video snippets and stuff, and then doing a lot of marketing, saying, hey, did you know? And trying to get people to step in. And that's a way to kind of get their feet wet, draw them in, whether or not it's going to be successful. Maybe I'll tell you next conference.
Good for you. Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on what we're talking about here. I'm not like a whole lot of people, but I'm a team player. So I've had some experience in all aspects of education, even in the corporate world as well. But in answer to his question, I don't know if some of you here in this audience are aware that Perkins Grant funds, as well as SB 70, you're allowed to spend that money for what we call paid externships for faculty. Now, in my discussions with different faculty in the area, I don't see a whole lot of people taking advantage of that, and I'm wondering why. I know, as the lady said earlier, as the gentleman said here, you know, faculty, I understand, don't have a whole lot of time, and at the end of the semester, they're really beat, you know, and they like to take their vacations in the summer, like many are doing probably right now. But in any case, I think there needs to be some excitement generated, just like your videos show, that we need to really connect what we're doing in the classroom with not only what's happening in the real world today, but what they're developing. And I think we need more information. Maybe we need group thinking. We need conferences like this, obviously, to generate the excitement and realize that if we're really interested in the future for our students, we'll be involved in this. So the money is there, but to get the excitement and the energy for faculty to really get involved, I think that's an issue.
Thank you.
You need to be at the mic if you want to ask a question so that the people who are seeing the recording can hear you. Okay, this will be the last one.
Good morning. I'm T.L. Brink from Crafton Hills College, and I wanted to get your reaction to free open source materials. I have an open source free psychology textbook that's with the Saylor Foundation, and I also am working with a colleague, Margaret Yao, to develop a free online statistical package known as Statcato, which you can find on page 19 of your presentation. But with all this wonderful activity coming from different corporations, what is your view of material that is developed free, open source, and distributed to all? Because the greatest single expense my students have is not tuition, it's not student fees, it's not parking, it's textbooks.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so my view is this is why I love librarians. If we can help students understand how to qualify quality information, I don't really feel that students have to be bound to a textbook unless it's so critical for one of the key exams or entry exams, right? So if there's certain protocols on how to learn math. Most of the courses that I taught, particularly at the MBA level and all the MBA level, would be more current materials, because the materials out in the market have to be just, you need current leadership thinking or strategy thinking. So I personally don't have any issues with open source. I think it's more of making sure that the students have the skills to be able to discern between what Lady Gaga says and, you know, a theorist has to say, and being able to evaluate information objectively and critically so that they know what's right or wrong. And that to me is, you know, one of the, whenever I have a class, I would always bring the librarian day one to explain this. You got to. So, yeah, thank you. And that's fantastic.
Thank you, Tracy. We're very happy to have you with us.
Thank you. I appreciate it.